There is a brand new book coming out only in Chicago, How the Rod Blagojevich Scandal Engulfed Illinois and Enthralled a Nation. Natasha Korecki is a political writer for the Chicago Sun-Times, and she joins us now. Natasha, thanks for joining us here in St. Louis.
Oh, good to be here. Thank you.
We are your little cousin to the south down here in St. Louis. And
Right.
Southern Illinois came home for Blagojevich and helped propel him to the governor's seat so many years ago. It's been 5 years now that he's been in jail. Is that possible?
It's been 5 years since he's been arrested. He reported to prison in March of 2012. So not that long yet, but I'm sure it feels like twice as long for him.
The book goes into the who, what, when, where, why, and how. However, you also bring up a point that there's some interesting circuit court of appeals that is due any day now. What's that story?
So this is basically Blago's best legal chance of reversing anything that he's faced. He's been convicted in 2 separate trials of a total of 18 counts. He was sentenced to 14 years behind bars, and now there's a federal appellate court that's taken this up. And what's interesting about it is the former chief judge of that court, who's very influential, when he listened to the arguments, he had some very choice words for some of the charges against Blagojevich. He questioned the very fundamental charges, what the prosecutors relied on, which was, in some cases, looking to trade a job for a job. And the judges said we've never seen anywhere in history where someone's been charged with this. So he definitely has signaled that he's going to be taking a hard look at this case and at the charges. And it's been 6 months, and so we should expect a decision pretty soon here. And he could be resentenced. He could get some of his counts at least thrown out.
In your book, this judge, or you make a point in your book, only in Chicago, How the Rod Blagojevich Scandal Engulfed Illinois and Enthralled a Nation. You say that this judge brought up the 1952 presidential election. What's the story of the 1952 presidential election?
Testing my history here, huh? What's interesting is that Earl Warren, who had wanted an appointment to the Supreme Court, and Eisenhower, talked about, an appointment in exchange for, for Warren's political support. This came up ironically, or maybe not ironically, during the trial by Blagojevich himself. He brought that up, like, hey, I thought that what I was doing was legal. Trying to, of course, for anyone who doesn't know, Rod Blagojevich, our former governor of Illinois, was charged and convicted of attempting to sell his power to appoint the successor to the U.S. Senate seat that Barack Obama had vacated when he was elected president.
Or it was just called horse trading, which is what politicians do every single day.
Exactly. That's what his contention was, that it was horse trading, that he had other reasons in history that he pointed to. He pointed to that example, and during the appellate arguments, the judge pointed to that same example. And so it did sort of give you pause and say, well, hey, is he going to reverse some of this? So, at the very least, this is the best chance that Blagojevich has had of overturning anything in his case.
Yeah. One of the things I've always brought up is it illegal to say, I'm going to sell you drugs, or do I have to sell you drugs for me to break the law? Right?
Well,
So he said, hey, I want a horse trade for this job. But he didn't because they arrested him before he did.
Right.
So did he break the law?
There are conspiracy laws. You can conspire or you can attempt to do something. And that's still illegal by our laws. If prosecutors can show that, you had the intent to do so, if you took, what they call, concrete steps toward doing this, and put various things into play, you can be convicted of an attempt. And I think that's what Blagojevich had hoped throughout the trial, was convince jurors to say, hey, I never got a dime, I never got anything out of this, I was just talking, it was all talk, and ultimately jurors rejected that, ultimately jurors said, no, you were trying to do this, and it's not for, what prosecutors said again and again, just because he's a dumb criminal, just because you're a dumb criminal doesn't mean that you're not a criminal.
Right.
Natasha, or if you're an unsuccessful criminal.
Natasha, you've been a political reporter for quite some time covering Chicago. You got to know the governor a little bit when he was, the popular politician, and then you saw the ugly side of him too, even speaking to him just before he went to prison. What is your take on him?
He is I think I mentioned in the book and elsewhere that a lot of people question whether he had ADHD at the very least. He's definitely a very different personality. I mean, you end up seeing that a lot in politics, but particularly with Blagojevich. He's just, he has the side of his that he talks about, I'm trying to think of a polite way to say this.
Go ahead. No one's listening.
His testicular virility, that was one of the big quotes that he challenges. He's someone who comes out one day with, much bravado, pounding his chest over things. And he would challenge even, he had a very petty side, if he wouldn't forget little things, little grievances. And there are different sides to the guy. What the trial revealed was that he just was a terrible governor. In the last 6 months, he hid in his basement. There's testimony that when the budget director came in to talk to him about the budget of Illinois, that he would hide in the bathroom inside government offices until the budget director went away because he didn't want to talk to him. And there's testimony of deputy governors who had to track him down at baseball games and, haircuts and so forth to veto bills because they would have become law. And he was just not doing anything with them.
All interesting, but shouldn't necessarily land you in jail for 16 years. Let me ask you this question, Natasha. Have you talked to him since he's been in prison, and how is he doing in prison?
I have not talked to him. He's not spoken to anyone. He's not done anything public. He's been amazingly quiet, which is just which has been fascinating to watch. I mean, here's the guy who was shouting from the rooftops, I'm innocent, play all the tape, and then the second he steps into jail, you just have not heard a word from him. And it might be realization settles in. He knows that the appeals court decision is out there and doesn't want to influence it.
Right.
And is finally listening to his lawyers who've been telling him for years to shut up.
How's his wife Patty and his children doing?
Well, they're, his oldest daughter just graduated from high school. I think she graduated magna cum laude. He's missing these big events in his children's lives, like many prisoners do. And they're still fighting for the appeal. They fly out to see Dad from Chicago to Denver, where he is. And, she posted something on Facebook recently saying that, they went up to the mountains after a visit with Rod. So, I'm sure
right.
With all families, it's very trying and troubling. But
he was sentenced to, 17 years, you said?
14 years.
14 years, and he's served 3, so he has 11 to go?
It'll be a little less than that because you get time off for good behavior, and if he's doing any kind of
Sure.
Chemical addiction rehab or anything like that, then you get some time shaven off.
And this judge is going to rule when? Do we have any idea?
They can rule whenever they want. Typically there isn't even a typical time, but 6 months is a good amount of time. And I would be, I'm starting to get to the point where, you should check it more regularly. It's going to come down.
Natasha Korecki is our guest. She's a Chicago Sun-Times reporter. She's written a new book called Only in Chicago, How the Rod Blagojevich Scandal Engulfed Illinois and Enthralled a Nation. Natasha, when the judge rules, will you come back and talk about it with us?
Sure thing.
You got it. Thanks for checking in. Good luck with the book.
All right. Thank you.
You got it. Natasha Korecki, Chicago Sun-Times reporter. The book, Only in Chicago, How the Rod Blagojevich Scandal Engulfed Illinois and Enthralled a Nation.
Wow.
I'm on his side.
That's a good read.
I'm on his side. I'm also on Outdoor Living.